Hello, welcome to Shad Life. This video is going to be a bit complicated because it is going to be about how do you size a mountain bike? How do you fit yourself to a mountain bike? And this is very specific to mountain bikes. Um, there's this graphic right here, and this is the old school way, and I still see it everywhere. On basically every single bicycle box, I see this printed. And so you do not fit a bicycle this way anymore, especially a mountain bike. It's just not the way you fit it. You don't fit it by frame size, which would be the measurement of the center bottom bracket to top of your top tube or something like that. That's how they used to be measured. And if you've been mountain biking for a while, they would have like a really small one be like a 13 or 14 inch. Then there would be like a 15 or 16 inch. Usually a company would go by odd numbers or even numbers. And then you had 18 inch and 20 inch and 22 inch. 22 inches were really big and they had really tall frames, right? We do not size bikes that way anymore. So get that out of your head. Another thing that I want to mention is bike shops. You're going to have a hit or miss here. A bike shop might have somebody that's actually a fit expert, but then again, what kind of fit expert are they? Are they like a cross-country racer fit expert? Do they know that you might want to do free ride or downhill or jumping or more aggressive style riding, right? So a fit expert generally is going to fit you on a bike in a seated position, right? And figure out, your distance to the handlebars, how your knee goes over your laces, all that stuff, where your seat should be positioned, and everything is about being in a seated position, right? And that's how most fit experts are going to fit you on a bike. So you need to be very careful with what even somebody at a bike shop is going to recommend. And then you have even the worst case scenario, and it's most common at like large chain bike shops. So there's some bike shops out there that have, 4 or 5, 10 stores or whatever, and they're big chain bike shops. Sure, they're legitimate bike shops, they sell legitimate brands, but what those bike shops tend to do is they tend to hire salespeople, and a lot of salespeople don't necessarily know all that much about bikes. They could sell anything. They might have sold cars before they sold bicycles, right? They're not riders themselves a lot of times, or if they are, they're barely into it. And I was recently at a bike shop, and the sales guy was a road biker, and I was looking at mountain bikes, and he knew little to nothing about mountain bikes. So you just have to be careful with the advice that's given to you from people who I wouldn't consider experts, even though they work for a bike shop, right? So the absolute first thing you should do if you want to try to fit your bike, just to get into the ballpark, is go to the manufacturer's website. Absolutely mandatory. Look up the model you want. In this case, you would look up salsacycles.com, look up the Rustler model, and then go to their GeoCharts or wherever, and they will, almost all manufacturers, not all of them do this, but almost all of them will tell you kind of the ideal height a rider should be for that given model. That doesn't necessarily mean that's 100% accurate, because I generally get sized into mediums a lot when I generally like to ride smalls. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So that will get you in the ballpark though. And that's what you want. You want to be at least in the ballpark. That way, if you bought the bike that the manufacturer recommended, you'll be close to where, if you're like a new rider, you're just getting into mountain biking, you'll at least have a bike that closely fits you, and then you can change stem length, handlebars, slide the seat forward, back, things like that. But ideally you want a bike that's going to fit you for two positions. And the two main positions are going to be what I showed you already, your seated position, right? Pedal forward, how much lean do you have? Are you reaching way out and lean forward, or are you more upright? There's a reason for both positions. More upright means you're going to be more comfortable and you're going to have a bit more bike handling control, but you're going to be less aerodynamic. Modern mountain bikes, aerodynamics isn't really a concern. It's more about bike handling, control, stuff like that. Because you're almost always in the woods, or you're somewhere where the wind isn't really that big of an issue. You're not going the speeds that you would normally be going, like on a road bike. You know, I was just talking to somebody yesterday. I was on a road ride, and, you know, we were cruising about 17, 18 miles per hour. And she was like, yeah, this is kind of my pace, right? And I've been in groups that are doing 22, 24 miles per hour, usually in a group where you're drafting and stuff. On a mountain bike, you're generally going to be going 8 to 12 miles per hour, unless you're bombing downhill. Then you're going to pick up those speeds, but now you have the advantage of the hill, so you're not having to work and push against the wind. So aerodynamics is not that big of a concern. So you don't need to be way out here and really low and everything to be aerodynamics. You want to be more upright. I used to say 45 degrees. Well, now my seat's in the dropper position, but I used to say 45 degrees, but now I'm even more like up above beyond that. Not 90, you don't want to be perfectly straight up, but maybe about, you know, a 20, 25 degree lean forward. Somewhere in there. And everybody's going to be a little different. But you get these people that want to be way lean forward, and they want to be in this like racer position. Sure, if you're going to be doing cross-country races and stuff like that, and that's what you like, or if you're a road biker and you also mountain bike, maybe you like that position. But for most riders, you're going to actually want to be more upright and more comfortable. So that is the seated position, and you want to have the measurement that really matters is called effective top tube. So I'll draw the line here, but it's really the line, and it helps if I raise the seat, the line from center of head tube to center of seat tube. That's your effective top tube. So you want to kind of figure out what is your effective top tube measurement, right? And you also want to try to run probably nothing more than 50 millimeter stem. In today's world, even with cross country, I've seen 60, maybe 70 millimeter stems. That's pushing it, but even more recent models, they're coming like 50 seems to be the max. So if you're going cross country, 60, 70 might be fine, but anything, a trail bike, enduro bike, anything else, even probably a, what's that called, a down country bike. I never remember that one, down country. You probably want a short stem, and so you really want that proper effective top tube, so you're not using the stem to offset. You can slide the seat forward and back a little bit on the rails. That does help. I mean, you literally have probably a couple inches of fore and aft movement. I'm almost always kind of just centered. Sometimes I need to move my seat back or forward a little bit, but most of the bikes, because I really focus on that effective top tube, I generally can run my seat in the middle. So the next one I want to talk about is your standing position. And I'm out here in Cuyuna, so I don't have my bike stand, but standing is basically pedals level like this, right? And you know, I always drop my saddle when I'm standing, and then you're just up standing on the bike. That's going to be your standing position. The measurement that you want for that is going to be what's called reach. So reach is from center of head tube to where your bottom bracket lines up. So you draw a line from your bottom bracket up to here, and then a line from center of head tube to meet this line, and that's going to be your reach number. It's going to be shorter than your effective top tube number. I did a whole video on front center. I'll put it up in the corner of the screen here for you, which talks about this kind of what we like to call the cockpit sometimes, right? So those are going to be your fit measurements, and you're no longer going to fit a bike by standing over it and lifting the front wheel to see how much room you have. Granted, if you can't stand over the top tube, you're probably buying either an older school design mountain bike or one that's just way too big for you in the first place. So you obviously need to go smaller. But because of dropper posts, almost all modern mountain bikes are going to have a slope, a much lower standover. So that's not a number we need to go by anymore. It's mostly going to be what's going on up front here in the length department, both seated and standing. That's going to be what you measure a bike by. Okay, so that was the basics, believe it or not. What makes this complicated, and if you watch the Hardtail Party channel, Steve on that channel, you'll hear him talk about this a bit. Not everybody's built the same. I'm 5'7", and I've been fortunate to have pretty equal body dimensions. So I don't have an abnormally long torso or a short torso and abnormally long legs or anything like that. Steve and I are very close to the same height. I think he's maybe an inch shorter than me, I believe. And he has a long torso and short legs. So all of a sudden, sizing a bike to you gets really complicated. And it's also why sizing a bike simply by this measurement of seat tube height is ridiculous. That's the old school way we used to always measure bikes is, oh, can you stand over the top and lift the front end? Well, in Steve's case, right, since he has shorter legs and a long torso, he'd stand over the bike, lift the front wheel and be like, oh, okay, that's good. But he would have an extra smaller frame, right? He'd probably have a smaller, extra small or 14-inch frame, 15-inch frame. So then he would get on the bike and sit on it, but he's got this longer torso, and suddenly the bars are like way too close and he's all cramped up here. So then the only way to compensate for that is to put like an extra long stem. Well, then now your weight's all over the front wheel anytime you do something technical and stuff, which is the old school way of doing mountain bikes. The modern geometry we have today is here for a reason. Bikes have evolved away from that idea that we slap long stems on it. Oh, that's how you size a bike, is by putting a different length stem on it. That used to be the way we did it. It's so ridiculous. So you'd have these bikes with long stems. The moment you stood up, you were way out here over the front wheel. So if you did anything that to pitch the bike forward, it was super easy to go over the bars and so on and so forth. So we're thinking of Steve's case, right? Now that we have these bikes that almost all of them have a lower standover, then he's going to be more focused on the length. And even though he's an inch shorter than me, he likes to ride bigger frames. He generally rides mediums. And he always talks about having a longer reach. Like for me, I'm riding that New Proof Scout, and it's got a 440 millimeter reach to it, and to me that's long, and that's basically where he starts. He wants it 440 or more. He likes 450, 460, right? So this is where fitting a bike, sizing a bike gets a lot more complicated. Is not everybody's built the same. If you're equally proportioned like me, you're lucky, because you could pretty much just pick what the manufacturer tells you and it'll work pretty good for you, right? There's personal preference things. Like me, I tend to pick small over medium. Even I'm usually right on the cusp. Sometimes I overlap. Sometimes they say, oh, small goes up to like 5'8", and a medium starts at like 5'6" or something. There's a few inches. I'll always go shorter in that case. Not always, but most of the time I do. And the reason for that is I like my bike to be easier to handle. I talk a bit about Do you want to be the pilot or do you want to be the passenger? If your bike's too big for you or it's a bigger bike, the bike's going to be taking more control over everything and you're going to have less control over it. If the bike's smaller, then you have more control over it and you know, the bike doesn't take over. So that would be the pilot. Again, you don't want a super small bike because then now you're going to be easy to, you know, go over the bars or harder to control. You're going to have less knee room and less cockpit space. You're going to be cramped and less comfortable, right? So you want to pick one that has a good fit for you, but also fits your body dimensions. If you have a longer torso and shorter legs, fortunately, because bikes have lower standovers now, you can actually size up. So if you're kind of in between sizes, I would recommend you size up. If you have a short torso and long legs, size down, because you really want to focus on here. Because honestly, if you have long legs, sure, you're going to have to jack your post way up here, but you have dropper posts now, right? And you can just get a 175 or 200 millimeter dropper post, right? And get that seat where you need it to be. And what's important is this area here. So that's basically my recommendation, is you start with the manufacturer's recommendation. And if you're squarely in the middle, it makes it relatively easy. But if you're on the upper end or the lower end of one of the sizes or in between, like I usually am, then that's when you gotta go, okay, you either have rider preference or, you know, your body dimensions. So again, longer torso, shorter legs, size up. Longer legs, shorter torso, size down. Not if you're in the middle. I'm talking if you're on the cusp, like in between sizes. If you're in the middle, just stick with the size and then you'll be fine and you can get the correct dropper post height and, you know, handlebars, stem, things like that. So once you have the correct size bike, there's all kinds of adjustments you can do. The one I do not recommend is getting a longer stem. Sure, if the bike comes with a 35 millimeter stem and you want to go 50, great, that's fine. You can push to 60, but that's probably, like, I don't recommend it, but some people do it. My friend Jason, he's putting 60, I think, on his bike now. He's a tall guy. I can't remember, 6'4" or something like that. But and he's also a BMX rider, so he probably likes the shorter wheelbase and the more BMX-y handling of being on a little bit smaller bike, so he compensates with a longer stem, you know. And that's when he's been riding a long time, so he knows all these little personal tweak preferences he likes to do, which if you become an experienced rider and you've been riding a long time, you'll just learn what you like and how to size your bike the way that you like it. So I don't recommend going too crazy with the stem. You know, if you get the right reach number and the right effective top tube number, you shouldn't have to do much here. But one thing you can do is you can put a higher rise handlebar on, a lower rise, whatever. I generally like to go higher rise than what's stock on a bike. Exactly what I did here. You can get different height dropper posts, and like I said, you can move your seat forward and back, things like that. I haven't even talked about handlebar width, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. But you can definitely set up the width of your handlebars, and as your handlebars get narrower, you come more upright. As they get wider, you lean forward more, so keep that in mind. You bring your hands all, you know, just do the extreme thing, bring your hands up near your stem and see how much straighter you sit, then bring your hands out wide and see how much more lean forward you are. So handlebar width does actually change your forward lean a little bit, so keep that in mind, and so on and so forth. So that is how you size a bike. I'm not going to talk about wheel size. There's 27.5 and 29-inch wheels. I will mention that I do like what some bike companies are doing. Their extra smalls and smalls are coming with 27.5 wheels, and then when you get into medium, I've seen a few companies that give you one or the other. You can get a 27.5 wheel or a 29-inch wheel in their medium size, and then you get to large and extra large and you get a 29-inch wheel. I actually like that. I also think that adding a little bit more chainstay length, which actually by going from a 27.5 to a 29-inch wheel, you kind of have to, right? By adding more chainstay length as the bike gets longer in the front, that also makes sense, because as you get taller, as you're a taller rider, your center of gravity is higher, and then now your leverage points all change and everything like that. So it doesn't make sense that like a 6'4" rider would be wanting a 425 chainstay length and 480 reach, right? I did a whole video on front center, which I just posted earlier, but yeah, that's a whole nother kind of thing about bikes and geometry and everything that I did a whole video on, and I'll just repost it up in the corner there, and so on and so forth. But fitting a bike is not an easy job, and just kind of to recap, be careful with what bike shop employees tell you. Unless you get recommended, there's a few bike shop employees I know of, or people that are fit experts that are really good at what they do and they know exactly how to fit you, but they're very few and far between. And most of the fit experts that I know are seated position, more of a road bike, racer, XC fit expert. They're not necessarily fit experts in how you fit a bike for more aggressive style riding, jumping, downhill, things like that. When you get into that, there's less importance on the seated position and effective top tube, and more importance on the reach, the front center, chainstay length. All that stuff becomes way more important when you start getting into the more aggressive type of riding. So sometimes when I'm teaching people like how to jump and do technical riding, their bike is their biggest culprit. Like, they're struggling because their bike is all weird fit wise for what they're trying to do. And so it is why I have multiple bikes. Like, if you can afford multiple bikes, not everybody can, you get one that's more of a XC, more of a racer style bike if you like that kind of thing. And then you get your free ride, your fun bike, right? Right? Okay, it is fun to some people to go just XC and keep their wheels on the ground. That's fine. If that's your thing. Someday it will be mine. I don't know what age that'll start to happen. I don't feel like I'm close yet. So there you go. Quite a detailed video on bike fit, but I wanted to do this one. It's harder than it looks, and sometimes you're just gonna need to ride a few bikes. And I'm gonna add a quick thing about that. If you're riding a couple of bikes, don't just sit down on it and pedal around the parking lot and be like, okay, this feels pretty good. Drop the saddle, stand up, pedal around, do a few little turn things, do some circles around the lot, stand up and pedal it, do all of that and see how it feels while you're standing. Definitely do that if you're buying a mountain bike. Don't just sit down on the bike, pedal around and see if it feels good, because 90% of the bikes, especially nicer bike shop brand bikes, are going to feel pretty good when you do that. So get out of the saddle, pedal around, make sure the bike feels good in that position and that you feel confident and strong on the bike. Sweet. Whew, that's a lot to take in, but you're spending a lot of money, right? If you're spending a lot of money, you want to make sure you're getting the thing that's going to work for you. Very important. I appreciate your support for my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace.